Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. Today I wanted to answer a question which might seem simple to some of you, but is actually at the heart of the reason for conflict this season generally within the Darkness and their various factional powers. And it's quite simply, why is Xivu Arath hunting Savathûn? This is a question that I think seems obvious to some, but is not at all obvious to everyone. It seems odd that one hive entity would hunt another, and so we're going to go back and we're going to explore this. But before we do, this is relevant to it, I promise, I want you to cast your minds back to a conversation that was had long, long ago between Savathûn and Oryx in the Books of Sorrow. It's from the entry called Strict Proof Eternal, and it's just a little excerpt, but it provides a lot of context as to what's going on. I don't have a strict proof yet, you know. Savathûn strokes the void with one long claw, and space-time groans beneath her touch. This thing we believe, that we're liberating the universe by devouring it, that we're cutting out the rot, that we're on course to join the final shape. I haven't found a strict eternal proof. We might yet be wrong. Oryx looks at her, and for a moment, just a moment, he is nostalgic. He is sentimental. He thinks, imagine the years behind us, the things we've done. And yet, being old doesn't feel like a scar, does it? It hasn't left me dull. I feel alive. Alive with you, and every time I step back into this world from my throne, I feel like I'm 2 years old again, at the bottom of the universe, looking up. But he says, Sister, it's us. We're the proof. We, the hive. If we last forever, we prove it. And if something more ruthless conquers us, then the proof is sealed. She looks back at him with eyes like hot needles. I like that, she says. That's elegant. Although, of course, she has had this thought before. It was this proof eternal that Savathûn was relying on. It was this proof eternal that failed when we killed Oryx the Taken King, not simply with sword logic, but with bomb logic. In that moment, we unleashed the Light Eater Ogre's bounty, the corrupted light, and freed it, thus defeating the Taken King and defying the Darkness's laws within the throne world of its greatest champion. And in that moment, by defying the champion of the final shape, we proved that we held the right to exist in spite of his darkness, and not because we had eclipsed it, as none had before. We proved that the sword logic was fallible that day. In many respects, it still is, to this day, the greatest victory that we have ever attained as Guardians. But it also set off a chain of events that has led us here, to this place where Savathûn has enacted her current plans. She is indeed a terrible power to behold. The worrying thing is perhaps that she has abandoned any belief in the Darkness's power as being absolute. The result of her abandonment of the Darkness can best be described as a schism within the hive itself. Savathûn has thus far disappeared and has congregated her strength, with what she can, within the broods she still controls. But Xivu Arath has used her disappearance to consolidate her own power over the unclaimed hive legions, and has converted many of those previously loyal broods to her side. This is the basis of a conflict that has been going on for well over a year now, and represents such a significant betrayal for the hive, and such a departure from their billions of years of history, that it's really quite remarkable we haven't heard more about it until now. Granted, we were obsessed with the pyramids and the discovery of stasis at the time. The first time it was truly mentioned, I don't know any of us who might have actually been watching. So maybe we can't be blamed for missing it. One of the last known communications from Osiris before he was possessed by Savathûn is actually one of the first notes we get on this topic. It was a report that followed his search across the system for more information on the invading forces of the Darkness and the hive of Xivu Arath. The entry in question follows him directly interfacing with the Dreadnought on Saturn and discovering more about the present state of the Hive. Take a listen to this audio log.
It was a success. I was able to reverse engineer the Hive's organic communication systems within the Dreadnought. I directly interfaced with their network of collective consciousness. Things I learned, Zavala. Things I learned. The Hive is fractured, shattered, turned on itself. The Black Fleet intends to punish Savathun for interfering with its efforts to communicate with us. No one knows where the Witch Queen is, not even her own court. And now Xivu Arath is using this opportunity to consolidate her power. I will return to the reef tomorrow to confer once more with Spider. He says he has news for me.
With that, something has been told to us that I think is hard to contemplate, or was hard to contemplate at the time being. Savathun has chosen a side in a cosmic war that has been distinctly between the forces of light and dark. But by breaking away and trying to prevent our communications with the pyramids, she has won the ire of her former gods and the master that controls them. Oh, how high the pyramid of gods and demons climbs, and Savathun was indeed a few rungs from its apex by the seemingness of the situation. The Witch Queen already controlled the Taken, and was perhaps still only subservient to the Worm Gods. But now her choices have set her as a supreme enemy of the darkness in a way that perhaps only one other Hive understood. I refer, of course, to Nokris. Savathun's communications with Nokris are in fact another great hint within the lore at her position and the reason why Xivu Arath began to hunt for her. In the season of arrivals, the most hated Hive heretic was ushered into the court of Savathun to speak to a false version of the Witch Queen, a puppet through which she spoke to him and deceived him, but through which I believe her intents were made clear and true. It is here that Nokris stood and conversed with her, and it is here that she stated that Nokris's abandonment of the darkness is something she should have honestly perceived as wisdom sooner. A transcript from the False Idols lore entry explains more. Nokris raised his gaze. What use would I be to a god? No gods. He nodded. So it has always been. Savathun's voice converged onto him from every direction. You, a usurper, the first tug at the end of the chain. To act as distraction or await slaughter. Nokris's voice sunk with disappointment. No, as a thorn, you have circumvented the deep through forbidden sacrament, and so you shall continue. The deep fears me as we feared you. Ignorance keeps, knowledge usurps. In this you have found purpose in my court. The high priest's shoulders straightened. You feared me? In a younger time, intents were narrower. I see your value, as we should have then. All who denied you, blinded by the sword, let them fall away as grains from the scythe. I am the implement. You are the mechanism by which we sever their chain. Savathun's voice filled his skull with silken promise. Teach me your necromancies, usurper of the ordered way, so that together we may circumvent the anchored logic that drags us into the depths. Serve as foil to scatter the pieces of their grand game across the cosmos. As Zol did for my heart, I offer a trade. Knowledge for knowledge. Grant me sight into the dreaming mind's talent, and I will teach what you ask. A rebellious bargain in the midst of dark tides. It is bound. Under my symbol, reborn and made in my image, our bargain will set new beginnings in motion. The masters convene here? Concern dripped from Nokris's words. Do we mean to move against them? Not so directly. Arrival is imminent. A shadow will reach out and make itself known. I am to obscure the connection? Where sky meets deep, you shall be the screen that sows dissonance, and for it, we will walk unhindered by the parasitic inclinations of those who believe themselves mighty. Nokris saw the scheme. The will of many bent to our hand. No longer do they draw upon us. Freedom. They are beset against each other. We walk the space between. Nokris and Savathun's speech here is muddled by the poetry of their discourse, but in short, Savathun admits that the Hive were too quickly blinded by their belief in the darkness and the sword logic to acknowledge the wisdom and strength of Nokris's newfound power of necromancy. She then states that they will work against the pyramids to toe the line between light and darkness and find true freedom between the two. She states that she will unanchor herself using Nokris's necromancy from the logic that has pulled so many down into the deep. It was for this and her interference with our communications with the darkness that Xivu Arath and the entity behind the darkness began to hunt the Witch Queen. Her bargain and the way it split the Hive is best expressed perhaps in some of the more recent lore in the lore book Ripples. In the third entry, Kel'Gurath, a Hive knight that we killed in the very first story mission of the Season of the Lost, expressed his rage and anger at the betrayal of Savathun, before ushering in another challenger. Kel'Gurath, Knight Champion of Death, kneels before his shrine of bone in the fog-ridden depths of the Ascendant Plane. Soulfire recedes into the ground around him. He places his forehead against the shrine, smudging a freshly bloodied sigil of Xivu Arath. He has added so many layers, but this is the first time the blood is his own. He does so to show his devotion, to reject the heretic sister, to pledge himself anew to war. The ascendant sky churns around him. He breathes deeply. It is his first breath of this life. He looks to the shrine before him. Every vanquished contender ground to meal and packed between skulls to cement them in place. Trinkets of conquest and old spent weapons adorn the shrine from base to apex. He looks at them as he prepares to face his adversary. An empty ghost whose core he had gifted to defected scarlet wizards. Its guardian had ended him many times, but he is Kel'Gurath, and through battle he is reborn. No guardian can escape him, for they are heralds of death, and he swims in their wake. His eyes drift to another conquest, crystalline implants torn from the forehead of an awoken Tachyon. He hunted her through the ley lines for 3 days, tracking her by the stench of her fear. When he found her, she brought the Ascendant Plane down on him. He did not fall for this trick twice. He caught her again with his next life. The Tachyon's final words echoed in his thoughts. I still see the flecks of scarlet in your chitin. How quickly you abandon your Witch Queen. Kel'Gurath recalls the night he renounced Savathun, the night he had scoured the scarlet from his flesh on the serration beds deep within the Hellmouth, the night Osiris slaughtered all Crota's kin. Savathun was weak to allow their deaths, to cede ground to the celebrant, to guardians. Xivu Arath avenged them. Xivu Arath took Osiris's light, and Kel'Gurath guzzled from it with vows of vengeance. He would prove his allegiance by stamping out any trace of the heretic sister. Herdru, his adversary, was a knight who still claimed fealty to Savathun. Herdru would be an instrument of example. Through battle, Kel'Gurath would confirm his new god. Through blood, he would erase the name Savathun and don that of Xivu Arath. He stands, bows, grips the cleaver and shield he will carry until he falls again. Herdru, he whispers to the bones. Tonight, he will purify himself in death. Savathun's unique position and her abandonment of the ways of darkness has put her at odds with her kin and her former master. She is now hunted by all and is attempting to eke out a victory by an alternate means. In the battle between the light and the dark, she represents a distinct third party who aligns with no gods and worships no logic but her own. Deception, cunning, knowledge, and the exaltation of enforcing perhaps the greatest constant in the universe upon others, ignorance. By Imbaru she shall gain power, and by Imbaru she hopes she will be liberated. But soon she will also take up a new shibboleth. She will embrace the powers of the light, and will steal them for her own. This plan and her abandonment of darkness is why Xivu-Arath now hunts her sister. She hunts her because she abandoned the deep, the sword logic, and the darkness. Because Savathun is now a heretic. Hopefully that answered the question that some of you were asking. And if it did, go ahead and leave a like. Of course, you can also go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications and keep up to date with my content. Also, let me know what you think down below in the comments section. Do you reckon that this schism between Xivu-Arath and Savathun has torn the Hive completely in two? Or do you think that there are some factions of them that have perhaps disengaged? Do you reckon that the Hive is in itself completely split and sundered now? Or do you think that Xivu-Arath has been able to consolidate all of her forces and many of the remaining Hive that were not truly loyal to Savathun? Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Of course, know that as per usual, your viewership is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Perudacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.